Nancy, go ahead.
Recording has started.
Good evening, Professor. So, we are Team Pi, and my name is Mansi, and in our team, we have Neil and Ruchita. Our project is about dynamic API documentation generator. Next slide, please. So we have developed a tool which is based on command line interface. Here the user can give main file with API code as an input. And as an output, the tool will generate documentation in Markdown format, which would have request, responses, and any parameter usage. Now, the key feature of our tool is that the user can give the entire API file or the API or the specific APIs that they want to generate the document for. Also, we have used GPT based LLMs for better generation of documents. Next slide, please. Now let's look about why API documentation is important. First and foremost, it is the backbone of API usability, which will allow us to seamlessly understand and integrate. And it would provide a clear reference point for any new developers. And it would speed up the learning process for any new developers, as well as it would reduce the time of any senior developers for explanation. Also, it would improve collaboration, by which I mean that it would enhance any API adoption for any third party consumers. Then it would reduce long term cost by supporting faster debugging and troubleshooting, and it would minimize any errors that has been caused by unclear or outdated documentations. Now next we will look into the challenges of manual documentation. First, it is time consuming process because writing and maintaining API documentation manually is a really tiring process, and sometimes due to tight deadlines it could be neglected. For like in a fast paced development environments, documentation often becomes a low priority, and inconsistent and outdated documentation can create a lot of challenges. Then, any poor documentation can lead to issues and delays. Thus, these are the challenges for manual documentation. Now, Ruchita will go through about the solution.
Let's talk about the dynamic API documentation generator. Here, like the purpose of it is it's to automate the like API documentation generation and maintenance. Here we use the LLMs to analyze the code and like generate the documentation. And some of the key features are like first, like we just give the input as a API source code, and the output will be the API documentation in the Markdown format. And like, what's the purpose of this? Like, why we are using this? It reduces the manual effort and it ensures like we have the like up to date documentation. And coming to the benefits, like, it is very useful for the development of the teams and for the external like API consumers and for the product owners. Let's talk about different models like the GPT-4o and GPT-4o mini. Like GPT-4o 4o is like ideal for full file mode because it can handle the larger context windows. Like this makes it perfect for processing the entire API files. And 4o mini, on the other hand, is like suitable for API by API mode, where it's a lightweight and very like faster and cost effective approach. And coming to the conclusion here, the GPT-4o is used for like the for bulk documentation generation, while 4o mini like provides a precise results for like individual endpoints. Coming to the prompt versions and evaluations we used, since the documentation is generated by LLMs, like evaluating and optimizing those prompts is crucial to ensure the outputs are like high quality. And the evaluation methodology here is we used a critic LLM to evaluate the outputs generated by different prompt versions on the same sample file. So like each response was scored based on like based on four metrics. One is the completeness. This means like whether all relevant details were captured or not. It checks that. And next, the accuracy, like which is the correctness of the generated information. And the next two metrics are relevance and clarity. And the coming to the like iterative improvement, like this system allowed us to like refine the prompts iteratively, like ensuring the better results with each version. And demonstrating these prompt versions and evaluations, here like we tested multiple versions of prompts such as like version 1 and version 2 on the same API file. So the outputs were like scored using a critic LLM, which provided the feedback and scores for like each prompt version. Based on the scores across all the metrics, we selected the best performing prompt for the documentation generation. And coming to the benefits, like this approach allowed us to identify the prompts that produce the most accurate and complete documentation. And it also enhanced the quality of the generated outputs, making the tool like more robust and consistent. Coming to the future scope, here the enhanced prompt quality with system level information is one of the future scope, like where we can integrate the system level metadata, such as dependencies and configurations, where like they provide the like the richer context to the LLM, which will also like improve the quality and relevance of the documentation. And the CI/CD pipeline integration, here we can also like automate the documentation generation as a part of this pipeline. So which also like ensures that the documentation stays in like the sync with code changes and reduces the manual work. And coming to the advanced prompt versions, like we can also develop a smarter prompts tailored for complex APIs and edge cases, where like we can also experiment with chain of thought prompting to enable the step by step reasoning, improving the handling of like difficult scenarios. Yeah, and coming to the conclusion, like these enhancements like will make our tool more efficient and automated and like capable of like handling the complex documentation. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, now it's demo time. So let me show you guys how this thing actually works. I'm gonna share my screen. So this is the main tool. You can get this tool on GitHub. It is available over, oh, okay, it is available. This is the repository 297 project. We have a README on how to use it, and it's a CLI tool, so you have different options and parameter and so on. So first, let me give you a quick walkthrough. Firstly, we have a main file which is document this. What document this does is you just give it a file. You can pass it which model that you wanted to use, which version of the prompt you wanted to use, and it will generate a document for that. So right now I have a bunch of sample inputs. So I have a complex API. Here we have a bit of complex large API files, and then I have a sample API file. It's just like a simple file. There's nothing much to it. Okay. So let's do this. I'm just gonna run this with Python document document this. Yep. Yeah. So I have my this ready where I'm saying I'm gonna use the I'm gonna document the sample API file with GPT-4o model with prompt v1. And since we support two model, one is the bulk API documentation generation and one is the API by API documentation generation. I'm going to use API by API. And I'm just going to make things a bit better for myself. I'm going to use the GPT-4o mini model. And regarding prompt version, so here you have your prompt file, your prompt folder. Here you have separate prompts for API to API generation and separate prompts for bulk API generation. Right now we have two versions for each. And whenever you want, you can add more versions and just specify which version of the prompt do you want to use. So I'm going to use, okay, so V1 is just a bad prompt I have used to demonstrate evaluation later down the line. But let's just use V2 for now. I'm going to use version V2. The detail of what is the flag, what argument is given can be found in the README. So let's do it for the complex API actually, you know what? So this is gonna use this file. So I'll just copy the path. This doesn't have to be in this directory, this could be anywhere. That's not a problem. So we will like if this is the complex API file, by API, what I mean is first we will ask it to give documentation for just this function by passing it just this, then just the orders, and then so on. And afterwards we will accumulate everything together and generate the final response. By default, this tool will create a repository called output, will create a folder called output docs, and inside, based on the model used and the way through which it was generated, the prompt version used, it will save the output over there. Okay, so it says the API documentation has been saved. It always puts a timestamp, so you know like which one was used when. So here's the documentation. I'm just gonna do a quick preview of this. Yep, where you can see it has the method, how it's used, the type of response, and so on. This generated a detailed documentation for us using just a single file. Now, with the same file, if I used version 1, this is the complex API, right? The version 1 is the using version 1 prompt where we just tell the model that it is something else and but not an expert technical writer. And if we preview this, you can see the level of details and everything reduces drastically. And similarly, if you want to use 4.0 for everything, you can. But we found out through experimentation that using just just GPT-4, like 4.0 mini with API API to API conversion, it is very good. And to show a counter thing where we do a bulk generation, that is in which we pass the entire file together. Just gonna do that. Gonna do V1. Come on, we'll use a bad prompt. I'm going to use mode as bulk and model. I'm going to use, yeah, four. Let's do 4 mini. Oh, what just happened? Oh, okay, my bad. Give me a second. Yes. So right now what we did is we generated the documentation for the complex APIs using the batch approach, which is the bulk approach with 4O. And here you can see the output will be saved in the output docs. 4O mini, this was batch version, prompt version 1. And this is the latest one. You can see this is much smaller than what we had earlier because this prompt is bad. Now, one of the core thing is when you have a multiple versions of prompt is how do you evaluate it? There has to be some standard means of evaluating different prompts. So for this, we have built in an additional facilities called prompt evaluation, which allows you to compare multiple versions of prompt to figure out which is better. What we basically use is we use a critical LLM and use that to judge the output of two separate documentation file. Like we map it each documentation with a version and then we use an LLM critic to evaluate that. The LLM critic would evaluate based on four fields: clarity, clarity, then clearness, as well as okay, here's the thing. So clarity, so completeness, clarity, accuracy, and relevance. This is how the evaluator would evaluate. So now one thing is API by API conversion uses a separate sets of prompt and bulk conversion uses a separate set of prompt. So right now let me give you a bit of context. So let's just look at the bulk thing. Okay. We'll look at the bulk prompts, which are should be around here. So we don't need to go through any full thing. Just remember in version 1 we say you're an expert who is aware of all cuisines. You are expert chef who is aware of all cuisines in the world. Just this is just so by default GPT 4.0 and 4.0 mini are quite good at API documenting generation. Just to see if our scoring mechanism works or not, we purposely put a bad prompt just to demonstrate that we can show the difference. And here I changed things over here because of which we had some error earlier. So we have a bad prompt and then we have a proper skilled prompt with good prompts like you're a highly skilled API developer and so on. So now what I can do is I can just do uh, Python uh, prompt evaluation. So you have two prompt evaluations, right? You have 8 AB2 and bulk prompt evaluation. AB2 is for API when you do batch by batch, and bulk prompt is when the bulk prompt happens. So we're gonna do bulk prompt evaluation. So okay, I'm just gonna copy this. So you have two files. Either if you already have the files saved, you have the output saved. You don't need to regenerate the files, or you can just enable the flag to regenerate the files, which is this this flag, and then it will regenerate the new document like new files and then evaluate it again. But because I already have the files we just generated right now, what I'm going to do is evaluate. I'm going to do I'm going to do bulk prompt evaluation. Okay, it will compare all versions. I don't want to regenerate, and the model to use. So by default, it evaluates on the simple API file. So basically, you need to have a baseline through which you can evaluate. But I don't want to evaluate on a simple API file. I want to evaluate on the, what do you call it, the complex API file. So for that, what I need to do is, where is my file? Okay, I'm just going to change this to the default is this. So I just need to pass it API file and gonna pass it the part to the complex file, the complex API file. The location this you can completely change this. This is not gonna be a problem. And I'm not gonna say regenerate, just do it. Okay, I think the flag is yeah. I put the wrong flag. All this thing is mentioned in the README, so it's like very easy for someone to use this tool. And the main reason for this being a CLI rather than UI is that we want this to be able to be integrated in CI/CD pipelines. So having a CLI makes it much more smoother. So okay, we are generating for prompt one for version one, and then we'll do for version two because we only have two versions. Okay. So now it's like okay, for version one, it has given score for each records, you can see. And for version two, it also for and for even for version two, it has done the same. Now based on this, we can determine which one to use. So if I just check our prompts, I think I added it in the wrong order. But from the looks of it, version one will be the good prompt and the version two will be the wrong prompt, which is you're an expert at chef and whatsoever. Yep. Did we do API by API or did I do batch? Wait. Yeah, I did bulk. And similarly, you can do the same for A2 for B2, this the other one, the API by API conversion. I'll just show that. Oh, my bad. This will be. Yeah, you can see now version one is now the version one is supposed to be worse because you're using API by API. First version is a bad prompt, it doesn't know what to do. The second version is the good prompt. If you look over here in API by API prompt, make an API doc, here's what I know. Just write something for it. And over here, I'm just saying you're an expert technical writer and so on. So this is how you can use this tool, and because it's a simple CLI script, you can easily integrate it into CI/CD pipelines where every time there's a commit to an API file, you can run this in the background and update the documentation. This allows you to minimize the time it takes to update the documentation and have the document up to date. And further, you can like improve the prompt engineering to give it more context about what those APIs are, what those APIs are there for and generate even better responses. Thank you.